this 10-part list. Groups are going to be on it somewhere. If you fall 10, you're a cult. And once you get to like full cult, I think the only difference is time, money, and impunity. So like Mormons, time, money, and impunity. Children, time, money, and impunity. Scientology, time, and impunity. And very often, if the cult experience wasn't that bad, it's just like Jehovah's Witnesses isn't as intense of a cult experience as Mormons because they're poorer, they have less power, they have less control, kind of thing.
So these cults, like, are they on the FBI watch list, law enforcement watch list? They need like legitimate stuff.
Some of them, but honestly, we had a whole thing called the Cult Wars in America, which was in the 80s. People had the Constitution to request, the desire to request laws against coercive control. Religious leaders and religious academics decided to fight back really hard against that, and we kind of dropped it. So the reality is, I mean, while I wrote this book, we were literally had a cult living on two sides of our townhouse, and talked to our FBI friend, and if everybody's 18 and you can't prove, like if they're physically saying they want to be there, it's very, very hard to get law enforcement to do anything about it.
Okay.
And this is part of why understanding that cults are about labor is so important. Because when you do want to go after a cult, like the TikTok 7M dance cult, China Church was just raided, and it was raided by the IRS, Department of Homeland Security, and one other thing. But it's basically like you go after them for labor trafficking, because that's where you're always try to go after the other kinds of abuses. It gets very, very complicated. But if you can prove the labor, that's where you can get the authorities involved.
When you wrote your first book, do you get like any kind of threats or any like negative stuff turn on about people? Like, don't write this book, or we're gonna go against you.
God is very toothless. They don't really exist. Military's too big to have care, so they just treat everything violence. Now, that being said, being a public person on the internet talking about cults, you get a lot of threats. And actually, for my experience, the worst has been Alcoholics Anonymous, where like I've literally gotten a death threat for talking about it.
So these threats, like, how do you just see it? And you thought, oh, this might be kind of fucking serious. I didn't tell someone.
I talked about if I needed some security for my book launch, but other than that, I have not had anything that has just felt like angry members on the internet. But, you know, one of the things, this is the next book, but I did the Army reach out to me and asked me to testify against my ex-husband, the toxic one I'm talking about, so they could kick him out, white supremacy. And when I did that, I just had to decide, and my decision was like, I'm not gonna live here. Like, you know, if somebody one day walks up and shoots me for what I do, I was trained to do my whole life. I believe in this more than that.
Yeah.
You know, but for the most part, they're cowards. You know, so that's the thing about bullies is mostly the cowards.
So your book, did you like have planned, like, okay, every day from 9-11, I'm gonna write 2 hours no matter what, or it's more like, you know, the creative process was more fluid? Yes,
and I actually wrote the whole first draft of Uncultured the last time we were full-time in an RV, and we would only drive for 4 hours, and my 4-year-old would be like strapped in her car seat with all of her stuff to do, and I would sit down and I would write. And that was how I got the whole thing written. And for the most part, for both of my books, I've never done more than a couple hours a day. When I got the deal for Uncultured, they said, can you deliver this in 6 months? And I said yes, because they gave me more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And I would not do that. I would have to have a year for sure. And so I did have some like 6 to 8 hour writing sessions just to get it done. I definitely recommend Creative Cavness strategies for that. But I like to do just a few hours a day of writing. And I also think that I know, right? Like, you don't have to have that much time. Sit down for an hour every day and work on your project. You'll get through it. I very much recommend having a very strong outline for the book you're going to write, because that'll allow you to just do little pieces at a time.
How often did you suffer from writer's block? If you did, how did you deal with writer's block? Cannabis.
I don't feel like I suffer from writer's block that much, but I feel like that's because, again, of those very strong outlines. Like, I haven't written a word of either of these two books without having the exact plan for what I was going to do. The fiction series that I'm writing is different. I haven't given enough time to that, but I've never like sat down intending to write and then just written no words.
Like, I'm a big believer. Everyone has to tell, right? But when should someone actually do like you take time to write their story for people to read? Like, when should people actually like write a book? Yeah.
When they have something to say. You know, okay, so two things. The amount of men that have told me they want to write a book and then tell me they don't like to read books is crazy. You should definitely have read probably more than 10 books in the exact category that you want to write, just to be able to like do your own, just be able to like have enough experience in that process. That being said, I think it is like when you have something to say, right? Which what I don't think they should do is think that just because they had an interesting life, they know how to write a good book, or they have something worthwhile to say. Everyone with a traumatic life has been told to write a book, right? This is really funny in the sobriety space, because like everyone in 30 is told to write a book about their experience, and the reality is, unless you're doing something different than what already exists. That being said, if you are looking for a book and never finding quite the right one, that probably means that's the book you need to write. And that's what happened to me. I kept reading other Children of God books, sort of hoping someone was going to tell my story, but also sort of make the conclusions that I wanted them to make. And I was reading other cult books, and I wasn't finding any of that. So one of the things I think Uncultured does that is new is shows that cult kids can teach us something other than just how to survive trauma, which is group behavior. We understand group behavior better than everyone else.
So is it more important to be a great writer or a storyteller?
It's the most important to just be a good thinker, to have ideas, because everything else, I do not consider myself a great writer, and I never will be. My co-writer on this next Culting of America, but she was also on the Uncultured team, Amy Reed, her writing gives chills. She came up with all the best lines in both my books, other than Cults of Promise Space Travel. I came up with that one. And I literally know I will never develop my writing craft to that point, because I'm having new ideas and doing this other stuff. And so I will pay people to help me polish my work. But this is kind of what I was saying in the beginning. Like, you need to have the idea. You need to have the brain that can take the story and connect it to the ideas. Everything else, other people help you with. You know, so I think it's the most important to be like the good storyteller.
So you might have a great team delegating stuff, but what's something you would ever delegate?
The first draft.
Okay.
That's something where, like, no matter how much people accuse me of not doing my own product, doing my own stuff, it's like, this is my idea. I wrote the first line of every word of that, and I think that comes through. And also, the best way I can explain it is Martha Stewart and Taylor Swift.
Okay.
They were the secret sauce. Martha Stewart allowed herself to be pulled out of the process, and that's when everything flopped. Taylor Swift has never allowed that. So like, I will never give anyone more than a 50% share in the business, in my products. Like, somebody owns 25% of Uncultured, I would have never given somebody 60%, because I truly believe that I have to be involved. I have to make decisions. It's kind of like how you say, like, don't pay someone to do something in your company until you marketing or whatever, like until you know how to do it.
Yeah.
So
what are you proud of so far? Like, what's your most proud moment so far?
Goodreads recommended Uncultured for Women's History Month. They put my book right under Middle Obama's.
I remember that you did. I remember,
That was a huge moment. Pre-sales of this book, launching the second book, has pretty much like I had a moment, right, where I was like, I have a six-figure company, I pay everyone very well, like I'm doing the thing. There's not like necessarily a fancy thing to attach to that.